Welcome to Live Your Best Years, LLC. We have an amazing, dynamic speaker with our organization, April Ivey, and we will let her speak at this time.
Hi, everyone. So good to be here. Again, my name is April Ivey. This presentation today, this care group is about mindfulness, using the power of positivity to create a lifetime of change. All right, so I'm going to start with a brief introduction. I'm going to get into what is mindfulness. So if this is a term that you've heard before, a term that's kind of been thrown around, we're going to talk a little bit about what it is. We're also going to talk about how it works. How does mindfulness operate neurobiologically? And then I'm hoping that you walk away with some practical ways to use mindfulness, ways that you can create positive change in your life. Okay, so a little bit about me. Again, my name is April Ivey. I've been working in healthcare since 2002, mental health since 2012. The letters that you see there, those are my credentials. So I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in social work with a concentration in mental health. I'm certified as a clinical trauma professional, and I'm licensed in 3 states as an independent clinical social worker, DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I do have international experience. So I've studied abroad working in Quito, Ecuador with disadvantaged children. So I've worked with all populations from youth to geriatric. A lot of my work has been with individuals, but I've also done family and couples therapy. I've done group work and several different settings. So I've worked in inpatient psychiatric hospitals, outpatient settings, community-based psychotherapy, crisis and case management. Healthcare is really a passion of mine, particularly mental health. I've done a lot of clinical supervision, so managing individuals who just got their graduate degree and their graduate licenses. And I've treated a whole range of diagnoses. So that includes depression and anxiety, which are probably the most common, trauma disorders, stress and caregiver strain, substance abuse, personality disorders, and more. So in addition to working with eye care and Live Your Best Years, I am currently with a medical practice in Washington, DC that works with high utilization healthcare spenders. All right, so what is mindfulness? Mindfulness lately has been getting a lot of traction in the field of psychology. So think of the word mindful as your mind being full of the present moment. So rather than carrying the baggage of yesterday or last year or 5 years ago, mindfulness is about truly being in the here and now. So it's an umbrella term. It can encompass meditation, controlled breathing, awareness. So you're really trying to cultivate that stillness in yourself, a sense of calm. There's a really popular misconception about meditation and mindfulness, which is that it's meant to erase your thoughts or get rid of your thoughts. And that's not possible, right? Unless you're comatose. So we are living, breathing people. We respond to stimuli in our environment. Trying to forget a thought will actually highlight it. So if I tell you right now, don't think of a yellow Jeep, the first thing that comes to mind is exactly what I told you not to think about. So mindfulness is not about pushing anything away. It's about learning how to be the observer of your thoughts. You're not suspending your thoughts, but you're trying to get distance from them. So the best analogy that I can use is picture yourself as the sky and your thoughts as the clouds. So you can kind of watch them drift by without becoming entrenched in your thoughts, without being governed by your thoughts. You're just observing them. A lot of cognitive theory practices are rooted in mindfulness, so cultivating this awareness first. And the reason for that is because we spend our whole days thinking. We're thinking about things that happened the day before, things that we have to do. Very seldom are we currently in the moment. And cognitive theory is actually rooted in the idea that our feelings and our moods are not necessarily connected to circumstances that happen to us, but how we interpret those circumstances. So again, mindfulness is about bringing yourself in control so that the interpretation is more intentional. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about how mindfulness works. So by getting to a state of meditation or mindfulness, you're actually developing new neural pathways in the brain. You're engaging positive emotions, making them easier to access later. So our autonomic nervous system, this is the part of our nervous system that's responsible for breathing, heartbeat, our digestive processes. You're starting to become more in control of that when you can cultivate mindfulness. Something that I've worked on with a lot of patients of mine with trauma is first developing this practice of mindfulness, which really helps with affect regulation, which is a fancy way of saying learning how to calm the body. Trauma work is important for people to develop what's called amygdala habituation. So this decreases the amygdala's responsiveness to repeated stimuli in the environment. For example, if someone has a trauma startle response, meaning they get very excitable around loud noises, learning mindfulness would help them maintain adaptive levels of arousal to predictable social stimuli. So you're actually reducing the anxiety. Trauma makes us feel and believe that when we experience a trigger, we're back in that traumatic situation and we are going to be harmed or threatened in some way. This amygdala habituation brings you back to a certain level of homeostasis. So one of my favorite applications of mindfulness has to do with chronic pain. It's actually in 2016, the CDC recommended behavioral therapy for chronic pain over opioids. And a lot of people don't know that. So we all have a somatosensory cortex. This is what receives tactile information from the body. So touch, pressure, temperature. And chronic pain is that pain that persists beyond the expected healing time. Through a process called central sensitization, that pain is caused by scrambled signals in the brain, and it makes people hypersensitive. So what we know now is that physical pain doesn't have to come from actual physical injury. There can be an emotional onset to physical pain. And so now doctors are seeing that post-operative pain becomes worse with catastrophizing. Catastrophizing is a cognitive distortion where you take an event and it becomes a catastrophe. And so with that type of thinking, your physiology is affected. And so it's not really effective to treat it with injections, medications, or surgery. Behavioral therapy is what helps you get your emotions and your mentality to a better space. Some of the literature that supports this is that they had people in an MRI machine, magnetic resonance imaging, and these are people who had chronic back pain. They were asked to imagine a back straining movement, and this actually triggered physical pain in their body. So again, our imagination, what we can imagine, is very significantly connected to what we physically feel. Another example related to this concept of the somatosensory cortex is that if two people get a finger injury, right? One person is a dancer and the other person is a violinist. The violinist will probably feel the pain more strongly because that person knows that the dexterity of their fingers is connected to their livelihood, right? Making a living by playing the violin, versus if it was a dancer, someone who uses their feet for their livelihood. Another example that really, for me, it really resonates because it makes a whole lot of sense. If you were to picture, having a really bad day, right? So you got into an argument with your boss, there was traffic on the way home, and then you open the front door, you walk into your house, and you bump your thigh on the side of the dining room table. Well, that pain is going to be really, really pronounced versus if you had a really great day, right? You got a promotion. On the way home, you took the time to get yourself into a positive mental space. You open the door and you hit your thigh on the dining room table. That experience of pain is going to be a lot less intense, right? So the actual signals of pain in the brain are significantly affected by our levels of emotional arousal. All right, so why should we practice mindfulness? So in addition to the chronic pain that I mentioned, mindfulness can help with a whole range of issues, including insomnia, anxiety, stress, depression. Like I was explaining before, it's really the basis for trauma work. So anytime I have a patient who's experienced a significant emotional trauma, I'm going to work with them on developing a sense of calm, regulating their nervous system, which makes them more amenable to the rest of the process. It makes them more therapeutically accessible. Again, why mindfulness works is that you develop a non-judgmental stance of kindliness and friendliness to the self. You're cultivating awareness of your present experience with acceptance. So I want to talk about that word acceptance. One of my favorite modalities of therapy is called acceptance and commitment therapy. A lot of people hear the word acceptance and the definition they think of is that you're resigning yourself to something. So in this context, acceptance means to take without defense, which essentially is that if you are in a tug of war between you and your emotions, there's an adversarial relationship there. This mentality of acceptance means you're dropping the rope, right? You're not creating a battle. You're just observing what comes up non-judgmentally. Through doing this, you're finding physical and emotional pain less aversive. You're observing it with less reactivity. There's less anticipatory anxiety. And you ultimately end up being back in control, right? You are in control of your thoughts and emotions rather than it being the other way around. It's a little bit of a radical concept because I think we're socialized to think that we should get away from things we don't like, right? Get away from thoughts you don't like, get away from feelings you don't like. But like I was saying earlier, sometimes when you push things away very strongly, they come back very intensely. So this process is about observing it, not pushing anything away, but having that acceptance. Okay, so here are some practical exercises. I actually want everyone who's listening for the next 60 seconds to just breathe. And you're going to hear the sound of my voice. You're probably hearing things around you in the room or maybe in the next room. But I want you to notice your breathing as it happens in your body. I want you to notice any muscle tension that's happening. Notice the positioning of your body. Notice if your jaw is tight or if there's anything tight on your body, any clothing that's tight or uncomfortable. Your mind is going to drift, and I want you to notice what your mind does and bring yourself back to your breathing. So as you continue to do that, you're essentially using the practice of mindfulness, right? So you can do this for 60 seconds or you can do it for an hour if you like. Grounding and orienting techniques are connected to our senses. So I like to tell my patients to find a focal point, whether it's the flickering of a candle or a soft blanket, something that you can grab onto or hear, right? Sometimes there's nature sounds that help us get into that state of calm, present awareness. But really, you don't need anything at all. You can just use your breathing. We're breathing all day, every day, but we're not always focused on that, right? We're focused on everything else. So this is bringing you back in contact with your body. I really like the technique of seated awareness because, again, you can do it anywhere and nobody has to know that you're doing it. Seated awareness means that you're noticing the positioning of your body on the chair or the couch. You're recognizing it supporting your body. You're noticing the ground under your feet. And again, you're using that breathing. Nature is a really great access point. So nature, going outside, there's sights, there's smells, there's things that you can hear and touch. And so the next time that you go outside, see how present you can be with all of those sensations. Another thing that I like to tell some of my patients is challenge yourself the next time you're in the shower, see how present you can be with everything in the shower, right? It's a very sensory experience because you feel the water, you smell the soap, you might feel the texture of the body wash or the washcloth, right? You hear what's going on. So see if you can really be in that space. A lot of people, when they're showering, they're thinking about a conversation they had yesterday or what's on their to-do list, an email that they have to respond to. So see if you can really be in that moment. These are two apps that I really like, Headspace and Calm. It kind of reinforces a lot of what I've talked about. YouTube is a wonderful resource. There are guided meditations. It kind of walks you through body scan and progressive muscle relaxation. Those are two exercises that you really can use for insomnia. So you start at your toes, you tense and release the muscle groups of the body. And again, it will slow down your racing thoughts. Many of my patients with anxiety, racing thoughts are probably the most troublesome symptom. And when we lay down to sleep, our body's in a state of inertia, right? So we're finally getting the chance to catch up on all the things we didn't get a chance to process throughout the day. If you focus on just one body part, right? So you focus on the energy in your hands, for instance, the racing thoughts may not stop, but they will almost always slow down. So you're using your body as a focal point, right? And all of these techniques, the more you practice them, the better you become. And then the final exercise, which is one of my favorites, is yoga. The word yoga means union. And so this is another activity that there's a big misconception that in order to do yoga, you have to be flexible or you have to get into these crazy positions, which is not the case at all. In fact, my favorite type of yoga is called gentle somatic yoga. And it's really, again, focused on the breathing. You're just bringing your focus to different areas of the body and you're centering yourself. All right, so these are some resources. In addition to what I mentioned in the slide before, there are some really, really great websites that you can go to. YouTube is great. The therapist that I cited here, she actually ran the seminar on chronic pain, so you might want to check her out for more information. And then, of course, there are support groups. So that is it for me. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today.